Hi everyone, and welcome back to PCA's Garage. It is Tech Tactics Live, our 14th episode. I hope this video finds you and your family safe and healthy. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about batteries, maintenance, latest battery tech, and tips. Be sure, if you want us to continue to do this and to get good stats and such, I ask that you please like and subscribe and comment. We've got some great raffle prizes for you tonight. We've got the Antigravity Battery Tracker, as well as a battery tester. So 2 prizes tonight, and to win them, you have to put your name and where you're from in the live chat section. And about at 8:20, we'll close it, and then we'll make the announcement of the winners at 8:30. So tonight's episode is all about batteries. And we needed to get an expert, and this expert I've met at SEMA. I've seen the products that he makes, and he's definitely an expert. We wanted him here tonight. Unfortunately, the bandwidth at where he is, he's in Ojai, California, and we traded off, so to speak, the ability to have video versus having just perfect audio, and we traded for perfect audio. So I hope you understand the choice that we made there. But our guest tonight, he's a PCA member. He drives a GT3 RS, so he's one of us. He's president of Antigravity Batteries. Welcome, Scott Shafer.
Good evening, Boo. I'm glad to be here and answer any questions related to batteries, be it lithium or lead acid.
Awesome. So, you know, batteries are something that we don't we kind of take it for granted, to be honest with you. It's something that we know we have to have, but really it's the start of the adventure every time we get in our car. And for most people, just having a battery that starts is probably enough for them. But I have an appreciation, or I started my appreciation for batteries in the late 80s, early 90s, and you can see from the picture here the reason why. That is my 1992 Mustang that I used to compete in car audio, and that's about 1,000 watts right there that you're looking at with the capacitor, 2 15-inch subwoofers, clamshell style. And the reason why I liked batteries, obviously, is so that I could power my sound system back in the day. And I had a heavy-duty alternator, huge battery. So battery was important to me. But for most people, like I said, it's not so important, but it should be. So to better understand batteries and to take advantage of Scott's expertise, we're going to take you through a couple of things. So hopefully we can pull up the agenda. The key topics tonight are going to be battery types, battery longevity, battery maintenance, jump starting your Porsche, the do's and don'ts, battery maintainers versus battery chargers, jump boxes, and portable jump starters. Opening your hood of your Porsche when it's dead, because if the battery's dead, the button that opens the hood normally isn't going to work. So we'll show you how to do that. And of course, we're going to talk to Scott about different modern battery technology and options to consider when you're possibly upgrading or getting your next battery. So if that sounds good to you, that's what we're going to do. And let's just go right to the basics. Scott, tell us about the battery types. I know we have flooded lead acid. I know we have AGM. Back in the day, we had gel batteries, and probably more prevalent for high performance and or lightweight nowadays, we're talking about lithium ion. So what's the difference and what do we need to know about them?
Technology, and it hasn't changed much in that 100 years. And what I'll do is I'll break down the main 2 types that we're using in our modern cars and older cars, but that we're using in this day and age. And basically there's a flooded lead acid battery and the absorbed glass matte battery, also known as the AGM battery. So both of these batteries are equipped with lead plates on the interior of them. And the difference between the flooded lead acid battery and the absorbed glass matte battery is that between the plates, for a flooded lead acid battery, you have a raw liquid acid format, whereas with the absorbed glass matte, you have fiberglass mats in between the lead acid plates that absorb the lead acid material and make it so it doesn't have high cycle vibration, and this in turn leads to what they claim as a longer lifespan better starting abilities, and it also allows them to create a sealed battery that does not have the potential for leaking acid or the requirements of having a vent tube on it. The last is lithium ion, which is our specialty. And the benefits of lithium is that it's a completely dry cell format, so there's no leaking potential at all. It also has about 60% less weight than a comparable lead acid battery while providing 2 times the cranking amp. And finally, it has 3 times the lifespan. So lithium is the next generation, but some of the negatives of that are that it is more expensive and you do have to buy a different standalone charger. So while they work fine or perfectly fine in the normal car's charging system, with a lithium battery, you do need a separate standalone charger because the lead acid chargers have what's called a desulfate mode that actually spikes the voltage to the lead acid battery to remove the sulfate that can accumulate on the lead acid plates. So I don't want to take too much time going into this because it's a subject I could talk about for hours, but those are the general differences between these 3 types of batteries.
So Scott, would you say the flooded lead acid is probably the majority of batteries in cars out there? Maybe some higher end cars have the AGM. I'm not so much, I don't know much about gel batteries. I thought they were more for like, you know, boats and stuff like that, or back in the day when you wanted sort of like a battery that wouldn't spill, you would go to something like that. And then of course high performance cars and, you know, racers and such go with lithium ion. Is that sort of the trend for each one?
In general, but I'll break that down a little bit. We should forget about the gel type of battery for the most part because it isn't as prevalent anymore as the flooded lead acid and the AGM, which are basically the main 2 types of lead acid battery on the market. And it's arguable which is more on the market. I would assume there's more flooded lead acid batteries because AGM is a little newer technology. And the the flooded lead acid batteries are cheaper, so they're bought by more consumers overall. But the AGM battery is the battery that's sort of taking over everything because it doesn't have maintenance requirements. It doesn't have to have venting. And most of the modern car manufacturers are supplying AGMs with their cars that they give you or sell you. Now, as far as lithium, I noticed that you brought up racers and high performance. And while that has been the case and is the case, what we've developed nowadays is basically completely functional in the modern passenger car, and it's not just race-oriented. And because it offers several benefits that a lead-acid battery can't, such as its built-in wireless jump starting that would never leave you stranded, it's not just for performance and race cars anymore. But in general, if we're keeping with that niche, it still is more oriented towards that.
Great. So let's, we're going to talk about battery longevity next, but I want to bring up the first 2 true or false for our audience to guess upon. So let's, Robert, let's do the first true or false. A fairly new battery can fail permanently if it's drained past minimum voltage. A fairly new battery can fail. And the answer is true. Let's go to the next question, and then we'll talk about both of them when we talk about battery longevity. Number 2, battery types, flooded acid, AGM, lithium, can be interchanged. True. Now, some of you might say, we're going to discuss the part of it, but they are interchangeable. So let's go back with Scott and talk about battery longevity. So here's my thing. Back in the day, again, if you go back into the 90s with my car stereo days, if I wanted a good battery or something like that, there were certain brands, right? Like let's just throw Die Hard batteries because that was a big brand back in the day. And my Die Hard battery would last in the Mustang for 6-7 years easily. Fast forward to a few months ago, my sister was at my house in her 2-year-old Volkswagen Tiguan. And she didn't leave her lights on. It was just, she drove it was during the day actually. And then after dinner, she goes out and tries to start it, and it's deader than dead. And I even pulled up my Honda Odyssey and tried to jump start it, and it just would not take. And I said, man, it's a 2-year-old car. Could it be that the battery is already bad. So she left the car with me overnight. I pulled the battery, went down to my local auto parts store, and they see me quite often. And I'm like, is it possible that my sister's battery, only being 2 years old, it's already bad? And without hesitating, they're like, absolutely, boo. 2 years, 3 years, we swap them out all the time. So to me, that was really surprising. For my personal cars, the cars that I don't drive, I usually have them on maintainers. But then the cars that I drive all the time, batteries last a long time. But I guess my question to you, Scott, battery longevity, has it shortened over the past decade, and you're only getting 3 to 5 versus, I know my '06 Cayenne S, the original battery in that car lasted almost 8 years.
Yeah, let me go into this, and I don't want to be too conspiratorial, but the fact is that in the manufacturing processes that they're using nowadays, they're using less pure lead, and they're actually using thinner lead plates, and the interconnectors, plates, and everything have less, as I said, pure lead, while producing thinner plates makes for a battery that isn't as stable or as long-lasting as it was before. And this is understandable to a degree because the manufacturers are trying to cut costs as possible. And on the conspiracy side, and this is accurate, I just don't want to seem like I'm bashing lead acid, but the fact is, by having a battery that does not last quite as long, there's more of a recurring revenue stream. So the manufacturers have indeed actually lessened the quality in terms to save on manufacturing costs and have more sales of lead acid batteries continuing. I think that was what you were asking about.
Yep.
If there's a second part to the question, please restate that.
No, it's just, I was just surprising to me that batteries aren't lasting, more on the 5 to 6 years. And I think, you still see the same kind of warranties with the batteries, but maybe they're just hoping that people don't keep the receipts and they don't get traded in or something like that. So back to my Cayenne that had the factory battery for almost 8 years, I put in, because I didn't think I was going to keep the car much longer, I just grabbed a no-name flooded battery in the car, and it only lasted me like 3 years, and it really surprised me when it went bad, because like I said, the first one went almost 8 years. And so I guess to kind of put it simply, like sometimes you buy the Duracell or Everready battery that lasts a good while, and you buy, you can go to Harbor Freight and you buy a stick for $1 of the same size battery, but those batteries just don't last as long. So maybe that's an oversimplification, but I think in this case, when you're talking about those cheaper batteries not being of quality, and maybe that's why they aren't lasting as long. So let's go.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, go
I
ahead.
agree with that. And I also wanted to state that there are brands that are making high-quality lead-acid batteries still. But you really have to do some research and check the lead quality, because they will state somewhere in their specifications whether it is 100% lead and the thickness of the plates. But that requires you going to their website and even making a call at times to these companies to see the quality of the battery, because there's so many variables within that quality, and there's so many on the market at different levels that in general, if you are going with a high quality brand, you are getting a higher quality battery. But I do agree that in the modern times, the battery has degraded in its lifespan, because I, just like you, have experienced batteries that got 7 to 10 years, 15 years ago, and the recent batteries we've bought for our standard cars are not lasting usually more than 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So can you? I've also heard batteries, around the world, there's probably only a handful of manufacturers, but there's dozens of brands. Could it be that there is one, a few type of batteries and they're just kind of rebranded?
Yeah, in general, there are about 4 to 6 companies. There's some Korean companies and some other companies that are making most all the batteries for the United States. And there's companies like Johnson Control who control a very large percentage of the market, as well as DECA. and they're making high-quality lead-acid batteries and rebranding them at different levels because they make the highest quality and they also make the lower quality ones that go out to other brands that are not as well known, and then they simply brand these manufacturers brand for these companies who order these batteries. So there are many different levels of quality of battery, excuse me, while at the same time being there's only a couple manufacturers of most of the batteries that do come into the United States.
So the old adage of you get what you pay for is true in this case for most part.
I agree, and it's an old adage like that for a reason.
Yep. So let's address the battery types and interchangeability that we said was true. Why don't you enlighten our folks about that?
Batteries they operate within a standardized voltage range, and that can be from an over-discharged battery is roughly 12 to 12.2 volts, up to they get charged from 14.6 to 14.9 volts on the high end, and they all operate within that range. But on the other hand, an AGM battery is sensitive or more sensitive than a flooded lead-acid battery to higher charge rates. So they actually make chargers that are more designed specifically more towards AGM or flooded lead-acid batteries. And as that relates to Porsches, in the PWIS system, when you install a new battery, in general, you should have the PWIS system, the specifications changed for the battery depending on whether you're going with AGM or flooded lead-acid. And that allows the car's charging system to understand what type of battery it's charging and then have a more efficient profile for that type of battery. So in general, any of these batteries are interchangeable, but there are nuances that are more specific to each style of battery, but they are not so dramatic that you're going to immediately suffer a damaged battery. But in general, you want to program something like the PWIS system, or if you're charging a particular AGM battery, you want to use a specific charger that has an AGM function as well as a flooded lead-acid battery function, so it can change that charging profile to match the type of battery that you have. On the other hand, something like our lithium battery, it can operate with any of the lead-acid profiles while in the car. But as I explained earlier, when you're using a standalone charger, because these standalone chargers have this desulfate mode that actually can spike voltages up to 24 volts to the battery, though you can't use a standalone charger for a lead-acid battery on a lithium battery. But within any car, a lithium battery does not need any reprogramming or anything because it can handle any of the charging profiles that a lead-acid battery handles. It's another complex issue I can go on and on about, but I just want to touch on those high points.
Gotcha. So for those of us in the club that drive, let's say air-cooled cars, to me that are more, less computers, no programming and such. So let's say I have an 87 911. If I wanted, obviously right now, most people probably have a flooded lead-acid battery in a car like that. If I went to an AGM battery or a lithium-ion battery, I can just do the swap, and because there's nothing to program, I'm assuming both of those options would be okay in that car?
But on the other hand, not knowing the charge profile, I would just want to make sure that that particular car is not charging in the 14.9 volt range, because an AGM usually likes to see about 14.4 maximum. So okay. I would just throw a multimeter on there or something like the battery tracker of ours that you're giving away that allows you to monitor this voltage for a little while, drive the car a couple days, see if you ever hit any high points in voltage, just to double check. But in general, yes, and absolutely, it should be an easy swap. But being conservative, I'm always going to tell you, hey, just double check and make sure everything's correct in the car.
Yeah, because it's really attractive to me if I could switch to an AGM or a lithium-ion, not only just for weight savings, but a lot of cars, these older cars that you've seen, typically the bottom of the battery trays are all rusted out from the acid or the vapors that were emitted from the traditional flooded lead-acid battery. And if this is something that can serve the same purpose in terms of performance, but then save you from potentially harming the surrounding area of the battery, to me that seems like a pretty good investment. And again, now that I know, monitoring the voltage that's coming off of my alternator and making sure that's safe to use these types of batteries. So cool. Let's go to true and false number 3. And then I know we have a question here. So low battery can cause check engine lights and PSM faults. True or false? Low battery can cause check engine lights and PSM faults. True. And I'm just going to tell you that's one that I experienced with my Cayenne as the battery started to get to near end of life. The car just kind of started getting really wonky. So yeah, just if you start noticing that, then it's probably a battery issue, and of course you can always pull codes and stuff like that just to make sure. But let's answer Mike S's question here, Scott. Can you address sulfated batteries and whether there is a cure? Sulfated batteries and whether there is a cure.
Yeah, I saw that at the beginning of the program, and I thought that was a great question to ask. What happens is when you let a lead acid battery over discharge below, say, 9 volts, it can vary with the different types of lead acid battery, but a battery that's been discharged in the 9 and 10 volt range can develop sulfate, and that attaches to the cells itself. Now, the longer and deeper that this discharge of the battery sits at, say you have the car in storage and you actually didn't even catch it early, the heavier that sulfate develops on the plate. So a lead acid specific standalone charger actually has a desulfate mode that is designed to remove that sulfate by spiking the voltage to the battery, the lead acid battery, I should say. And what the effect is it sort of sheds some of that sulfation. But in general, if you have let your battery sit in those low voltage statuses for a period of time and a heavy layer of sulfate develops, there is no cure. So the only cure is, in fact, to just maintain your battery correctly from the start. And if you do that and don't let it get into that 10 volt range at any point, you're going to have a battery that provides you with that lifespan that is claimed by the manufacturer. And that's one of the issues with lead acid, is that they cannot prevent the over discharge. So if you're away and you have other accessories on your car that draw down that energy fast, that's called a parasitic draw, then those can create sulfation issues in the long run if you're not driving your car very often and keeping it above that. You want to keep it in the sweet spots, which is 12 volts and above. 12 volts is severely discharged, but above that, and you're not really ever getting the sulfate.
Well, that's a great segue to our next topic, which is battery maintenance. I'll share with everyone what I do is probably the best thing for the batteries is just drive your car every day. And for those of you that daily drive your Porsches, good for you. And that's probably the only thing you really need to do. For me, if there's my 996 that I don't drive on a daily basis, and those cars I keep on a battery maintainer. And when I go to drive on the weekends or something like that, I will pull it, and it seems to have worked. Most of the batteries that I've had in my car have lasted a good long while. So Scott, am I doing it right? Is there anything else that I need to do with regards to battery maintenance?
I think it's all about sort of the subject I brought up before, and without getting to a point of sulfation occurring on your battery, and that's just maintaining it above the 12 volt level. Now, if you're a daily driver, like you said, some people are, that's the optimum situation where you actually don't need to put it on a maintainer, on a charger, because just the charging system alone, if you're driving 20, 30 minutes, either both ways, is going to keep the battery in a high state of charge. And that goes for even if you're driving every couple of days. Now, if you get into a week or 2 weeks, that's where you may want to look at putting the maintainer on it. And the only reason is because normally a battery should last easily 2 weeks, and you should be able to start it and go driving again, and it maintains itself. But we know that some people put more accessories on their car, whether it's a camera, whether it's a radar detector, or something else that draws energy from the battery while the car is static and turned off, those can create a fast parasitic drain, which will actually bring your battery down very quickly. So if you're not driving very often, as I said, up to a week or two, then you want to put it on a maintainer and keep the voltages so you're not close to bouncing off the 12-volt range.
So would you say that a modern Porsche, if you park it for 2 weeks and your battery is maybe not brand new, but let's say at its half-life, that it has enough parasitic draw that it could drain your battery in 2 weeks?
Let me give you my specific experience with that, and it's no. It should the modern Porsches, at least mine. I have a 991 GT3 RS, and it has an incredible what Porsche calls the battery management system for their cars. That meaning after you shut the doors, lock it, and walk away, it will hit another level where all the systems kick down and they're not drawing much energy at all. So we tested this specifically with the stock Banner 70 amp hour lead acid battery that came with it, and I could easily get 3 and sometimes close to 4 weeks just letting the car sit. So you should have no problem with 2 weeks or even 3 weeks with a battery, even at its half-life. So I just want to be blunt about that because it shouldn't be discharging faster than that. And if it is, that could indicate a battery that's going bad or that you've had other accessories on there. Now, for a turbo, there's a lot more electronics on a turbo. So while we've tried to test with some clients of ours, I don't have any hard numbers that if they can only go about 2 weeks because there are more accessories and more electronics on a modern turbo.
But a good rule of thumb is if you're going to park it for more than a week or 2 weeks and you just plug it in and it won't do any harm if you have a good maintainer, correct?
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. Every 2 weeks you should be able to. I mean, a good battery, even at its half-life, should easily last 2 weeks in a modern Porsche.
Got it. We've got some really cool questions that I want to try to hit real quick here. One from our local gentleman here, Chris Scott. When testing a battery, is testing from the post under the hood as effective as testing directly on the battery itself? Is it the same?
Testing on the battery, you're saying from the grounding post next to the shock tower, or from either way? I could just suggest that testing from the battery itself always is the best because you're testing directly on the battery, and the battery is what produces current and accepts loads. So you want to test directly from the battery.
Yeah, so for example, in the 996 or 997s, I think there's a positive post and a negative post in the engine bay where you could use to jump the car, as opposed to going under the front bonnet and going and lifting all the panels and then and testing there. But I would agree. I would tend to agree with you, and I'm glad you're the expert saying is I always go directly to the source, straight to the battery. It's not much more effort, but you know it's you're going to get a more accurate reading. There's another great question from Alan Novak. He says he bought a couple of no-maintenance flooded lead acid batteries and hasn't been able to check the fluid. Are they really no maintenance? Is there any way to remove the cell caps?
No maintenance batteries. It's a term they use because they, in fact, can be no maintenance, and by no maintenance, they mean you do not have to add water. But the fact is, any and every battery in any car ever has to be maintained correctly, whether that is keeping it on a maintainer because you store it a lot or driving sufficiently to keep it in a high state of charge. But you want to stay within the 60 to 100% state of charge at all times with your lead acid battery to prevent sulfation and damage. So that is considered maintenance from my perspective. So there is no battery that's no maintenance, and they're only claiming that because you don't have to add water as you had to in the earlier years.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's a marketing thing too, right?
Exactly. There's a lot of marketing in regards to lead acid batteries and their cranking amps and their amp hours and so on.
Okay, so I know we're probably tabulating. Oh, here I see the results of our winners. So let's take a quick detour and announce the winners. John Cedor, congratulations. You've won the Antigravity Battery Tracker, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And Greg Brill, you've won the car battery load tester. Make sure you send Damon a quick message and we'll get your address and we'll send both of those prizes out to you. Now for those of you that didn't win, and for those of you that didn't win the set of tires from episode 13, I've got a great deal for you. We've got a social media contest going on. You can find it on Facebook at PCA's Facebook page. All you have to do is like our Facebook page, subscribe to YouTube, which I'm sure you've already done, and also follow our Instagram. If you do those three, then share that image on your Facebook feed. That'll automatically enter you to win a set of Michelins. $2,000 worth of Michelins. That's all you got to do. Like the 3 social media channels, boom, we put you in a contest to win Michelin tires. The odds are fantastic, people, and it's free. Let me say it again, it's free. So if you don't do that and you never win anything from PCA, it's not going to be my fault because I'm giving you a great opportunity. And Michelin, thank you guys for giving us that set of tires to give away to our members. So actually, I take that back. It's not just our members. It is a contest open to everyone. So tell your friends and family to do the same thing with our social media channels, and they can be entered to win the set of Michelins. Okay, enough plugging of the social media contest. Let's talk about jump starting your Porsche, especially modern day Porsches with all the significant computers and electronics in it. It can be it can be daunting because you don't want to do anything wrong. So before I show a video of how to get in to your Porsche that has a dead battery, Scott, can you tell us, the do's and don'ts of jump starting your Porsche, especially the newer ones?
Sure. In general, you always want to follow the manufacturer's recommendations. That means go into your Porsche manual and look how they say to do it. Now, being that I have a Porsche and I have done this several times just for testing purposes, I can say you always want to connect to the battery terminals correctly. So you do not want to connect to the positive and negative terminals of the battery directly. You connect to the positive, and then the negative side of your jump starter, you want to go to the negative stud, which is located next to the shock tower. If you're facing the driver's side, then you'd want to go to the right-hand side where there is a negative stud that you can connect to. And the reason for this is because in modern cars, I think since about 2010, they started doing this. They put what's called an intelligent battery sensor on the battery cables that connect to the batteries in the car. And these intelligent battery sensors monitor the current and the voltage that's coming in and out of the battery, and they can be sensitive to a large spike of voltage coming from a product like a jump starter that isn't really monitored that well. So that's why you don't want to put something directly into that system and have the potential, though rare, to damage any components within your car.
Yeah, definitely you want to be familiar. If you haven't read the process of how to jumpstart your car in your owner's manual, it's laid out there for you. I would read it ahead of time before you actually need to use it because it'll be very frustrating trying to figure that out on the side of the road or in a dark parking lot. But one of the videos that we did earlier today, let's just roll it and we'll talk about it as you're viewing it. So this is a Cayman, and what we're doing is if your battery were to go dead, you can't unlock the front bonnet to access your battery. So you actually have to go into your fuse panel here and pull out that little post. And on the side of that post are connectors that you would put a positive battery clip on. There you go. And then that battery could be another car or it could be another battery. And then your negative would go onto your door latch right there. And with that bit of power, you're not doing that to start your car, you're doing that so that you can pop the hood. Because if you don't have that power, your battery's dead, you can't pop that hood. And sometimes, Scott shared with me, is sometimes a button on the floor there might not work even though you have everything connected. So you might want to try the hood button on your key fob. So between the combination of the key fob and on the door sill there, you should be able to pop open the hood. So that's a neat little thing there. And again, you want to familiarize yourself with that process now when you're relaxed, as opposed to in a situation where you're worrying about whether or not you're going to get home. And then also, that post you saw was pretty small, and the jumper cables I was using, it kind of worked. So if you have jumper cables, or if you're going to buy jumper cables, you might want to think about getting one the size is maybe a little bit easier to kind of grip that little post inside by the footwell. So that's something right there for you guys to consider. But once you pop open that front bonnet, then now you can get to your battery and kind of tend to it like you normally would. So let's go to, since we were talking about jump starting, let's go to true or false question number 4. True or false question number 4. Once your vehicle is running, you can remove your battery terminals. True or false? Once your vehicle is running, you can remove your battery terminals. False. That is a big false. Scott, do you want to add anything to that, or is it just pretty obviously that is not something you do?
Yeah, that's definitely not something you do. And the reason why is because the battery actually absorbs some spikes and smooths out the voltage to the alternator. That's putting it in basic terms, but it takes some of those loads that may be coming from the car's system and smooths everything out. So you never want to disconnect your terminals from the battery. Even though your car would seemingly still run, it can damage some of the components in your car.
We have another great question from a local member here, Chuck Visconage. Are AGMs lighter than wet cell? I have not found this to be the case, but wanted to ask the experts. I am not the expert, and I will say there is not a weight difference. But what do you say, Scott?
There is supposedly a smaller weight difference, but we've got to quantify that because you can have two similar lead acid batteries that claim they are 70 amp hour batteries, and they are not 70 amp hour batteries on the interior. They vary. So you could have two batteries and think that they should weigh the same, one being an AGM and one being a flooded lead acid, and they won't, but they're the same amp hours and from the same manufacturer, so that can provide some difference. But in general, the theory is that AGM is supposed to be a little bit lighter than a standard flooded lead acid battery, being the way they design the plates a little bit tighter and other factors. I'm not a professional in the lead market, but I've read about that and read some sites on that.
All right. This next question from Jack Beckman will be a great segue to our next section. Are jump starters via the cigarette lighter safe to use? Jack Beckman.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I would stay away from that. They're not really what these devices are trying to do is actually put a little more energy into the battery so that the battery will have energy to start the car. They're not actually jumping or providing high enough current to start the car, because if they did, you would fry your wires going to your battery, because there's no way an 18 gauge wire from your cigarette port could transmit the 150 to 200 amps that are needed to start a car. So what these devices do essentially is try to basically charge your battery to a point that it will start. And from my experiences with them 10, 15 years ago, they've never really worked that well, but I don't think they're dangerous. I think they just try to give the battery a little bump.
Yeah. So as I said, that kind of leads into our next segment, talking about battery maintainers versus battery chargers. I have a couple here. This is like a battery charger that my dad gave me back in the day, and I don't know that if it has even a float status or mode, whereas this one is your typical battery charging system that kind of floats. So you want to talk a little bit about the difference between a maintainer versus a charger and what to use during long-term storage?
Yeah, absolutely. So a maintainer is sort of what it states it is. It's used to maintain your car's battery um, and provide enough current to cover the basic parasitic items that would be on your car. And by parasitic items, I mean the computer within the car, any accessories. They will always be drawing a little bit of energy from your battery when your car is off. So these maintainers are a very low amp rate type of charger. So they usually offer 1 amp of current. So they're basically just barely floating the battery and covering the parasitic draw on your car, therefore keeping it maintained. On the other hand, a battery charger is actually from 4 to 15 amps of current, and they will actually charge your battery relatively quickly depending on the amps they are rated for when connected to your battery. So say in the event you've left your lights on and you've discharged your battery, if you connect a maintainer to your battery, it will take up to 2 to 3 days to recharge your battery fully. Now, on the other hand, if you have a battery charger, depending on the current rate, some are 4, as I said, some are 15, it will actually charge your battery relatively quickly. So the difference is just in how much current they have in terms of charging your battery quickly.
So if you have a battery charger connected to your car and it's charging at 4 or 10 amps, I've heard about boil over and such. Is it a bad idea to have that higher rate charging on your car for a long period of time?
Well, this depends on a couple things. The older chargers, like I saw one in your images, don't have any protections built in, whereas several of the modern chargers are smart chargers, and they actually dictate how much current is going to the battery as the battery is charging. So they actually will swell the charging current and voltage as the battery gets charged, whereas the older type of standalone chargers can actually slam the battery with the full 15 amps. So those are some things that you want to look out for. Modern charger, read the instruction manual is the best thing I can offer you. And I would suggest just to stay away from the older types of chargers because they can create those dangerous situations where you have boil over, or if they're charging at these high rates, they're creating more hydrogen gas that happens when you any charging of a lead acid battery creates hydrogen gas. So if you're dealing with a flooded lead acid battery and you're getting boil over and really slamming the current into it, you can have more hydrogen gas. And especially on your older Porsches, this can be dangerous if the hood is closed and there's any spark or anything in there.
Good tip, good tip. So definitely battery maintainers are the safe ones that are going to maintain at a low rate. Battery chargers, if you're going to use a battery charger, use a modern smart battery charger so that it can fluctuate, and if your battery's full, it knows when to stop and just go into maintenance mode. So make sure you guys take that tip. So the whole reason why we're talking about batteries this evening is because I was at an autocross a few weeks ago, and as I told you, I keep my 996 on a battery maintainer all the time. So I started the car from home, drove to West Virginia, an hour and 15 minutes away, and everything was fine. And then I go to it was kind of warm that day, and I'm sitting on grid, and my electric fans kicked in. And I didn't think anything about it. You know, I'm like, okay, fans are kicking in and keeping my car cool. Everything's fine. And then they had a delay, so I shut off my car. And when I went to start it back up, I had nothing. So this is the first time I think the event organizers had someone yell to them, I need to jump on grid. But a gentleman, one of the members, came over, and he had this little, it was maybe like size of two playing cards, and he said, you know, I haven't used this before, but maybe it'll work. So he hooked it up to my battery, and like I said, it was really small, and we just waited like maybe even 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and sure enough, this tiny little thing fired up my car. So I left the car running the rest of the event. So let's talk about jump boxes and these little portable jump starters. You know, jump boxes I'm familiar with, you know, at dealerships and stuff, or at shops you see these, like, you know, like the Stanley one, these big burly things that you can use to start your car. It essentially has a big battery in it, But these little ones are kind of new to me. So Scott, tell me about them.
Sure. I can actually proudly say that we brought this product to market in 2013, and we're arguably the first company to bring this product to market. And ours is called the MicroStart. It's a small lithium jump starter and power supply that can also charge your cell phones and stuff. And in fact, our XP10 model won the Consumer Reports Best Rated Jump Starter in 2015. So they're really beneficial products because they're something that can fit in your glove box, even under a seat, and they do have the ability to start your car, charge your cell phone, and even your laptop computer, depending on the brand and its features. So they can be exceptionally beneficial to get you out of those emergencies or your families out of emergencies wherever they are. They're easy to connect, and everything's included to easily jumpstart your car. In regards to what was your second part of that?
So just, you know, these things are so small these days as opposed to the big boxes. And, you know, I just figured the big boxes back in the day just had like a huge battery in there, and that's what was starting. But these little ones, these lithium ones, I guess they're power packed, and they really did work. And there's, you know, after that happened to me, I kind of went and looked at different ones, and there's probably hundreds of different types. Obviously, the MicroStart that you offer is really comprehensive. You know, if people are considering buying something like this, what's to look out for, and how do you know you're getting a good one, and can they be dangerous if you get like a cheap one?
Yeah, it can be. This is something called lithium polymer or lithium cobalt, and it's an exceptionally energy dense type of lithium. And lithium has many different types. Like in our automotive batteries, we use lithium iron phosphate, but in these mini jump starters, it's the lithium polymer. Extremely energy dense, and if they don't have certain built-in protections, such as our MicroStart has, they can get to the point in worst case scenario of catching fire because they're so, as I said, energy dense. So with a Porsche in general, you want to get one of these, but you want to look for something that has a minimum of milliamp hours, which is 12,000 milliamp hours, and that's sufficient energy to start a Porsche. Whereas if you use other models that are on the market, they can claim 10,000, 15,000, but they may not even be a real 12,000 milliamp hours. So this is where this market gets quite confusing because, for example, on Amazon, they have hundreds of these that are, some are no-name brands, and then there's also name brands. But what you have to look out for is that they're accurately depicting the numbers, and just being able to go back to these companies if there is an issue and have your product warranted and making sure that they're there, because they can be a dangerous product if not used correctly. So you do have to look out for what you buy, do a little research on them. In this type of product, I would suggest absolutely going with one of the top name brands.
So with these, you charge them fully, I guess when you get them, and you keep them in your car. How long can you keep them in the car before you have to recharge them again to make sure that when you are caught in an emergency that you don't have, you know, a flat spare tire, let's say, so you don't have a dead battery that you're hoping that was going to start your car?
Oh, this is a really good question. I'm going to sort of go off track here. You keep showing the product on your on the pictures, and that product, as you can see, it has a certain on and off button. So that product does not have an automatic shut-off button. And things like this are very important because if you have one of these small portable jump starters and it doesn't have the automatic shut-off and you forget to turn it off, you're going to come back to a dead battery. So whereas our MicroStart has automatic shut-off, so after you're finished using it, you put it back in its case, and it will turn itself off and not allow any further discharge. Now, to get back to your question of how long they last, it can be from 4 to 6 months, and we recommend checking it every 3 months. And it usually goes down about, for example, ours have 5 bars of LEDs that show their status. It usually goes down about 1 bar every month and a half. Okay. So we recommend checking them every 3 months. But you can usually get about 4 months and still easily be able to start your car.
Okay, so that's pretty reasonable. Let's go to, if we can, go to some tips, and then we'll wrap up with modern battery technology. Man, this hour has flown by, and I have so many more questions. So some quick tips for you here today. tip number one is we talked about reading your owner's manual and being prepared. Again, do it when you're not stressed and you're not stranded. All the information's there. Here's one that, it's kind of a personal thing for me. If you have a car that has radio codes, keep those radio codes in an obvious place, because when your battery goes dead and you hook up your battery, there's nothing more disappointing than driving home from the battery place and not having your stereo to play your music. So make sure you keep your radio codes handy. Note battery install date. Now I know some batteries you buy, they have little stickers that you can peel off to show the month or date that you bought it. But lately I've bought several batteries and they didn't have that sticker. So what I did was I just simply put on a piece of masking tape or painter's tape, and I just wrote down. And that's just to keep it simple and keep an eye on, if especially with these newer batteries, if you get to the 3-year mark, kind of start looking after it, And then fourth, and as we talked about earlier, the old adage of, you get what you pay for. Don't skimp with a cheap battery, especially when your car depends on it every time you get going, right? So don't skimp on a cheap battery. So we have a few minutes left over. Let's talk about modern battery technology. And I know we talked about the lithium and the weight savings, but there's more to be offered with modern battery technology. And Scott, if you want to enlighten our folks.
Sure, and I'll be addressing lithium mostly because lead acid really hasn't changed. But in regards to lithium, we've gotten to a point where we can have features built into the battery such as wireless built-in jump starting. Now, this is a game changer in the battery world, because this means if you ever left your lights on, or for whatever reason the battery has discharged and it has gone dead, with our battery, we actually provide a wireless key fob, 2 of them. And what you can do is your battery's gone dead, you come back to your car, no life, you press the key fob, the battery accesses its reserve capacity, starts the car, and you can drive away safely. So it's not only good for the user, but if your wife ever used your car, she'll never be stuck with a dead battery, because our battery intelligently monitors its voltage, and when it sees it's at that critical discharge point, it actually puts itself to sleep. So right before complete discharge, it puts itself to sleep with enough energy to get about 5 more start attempts. So with that, batteries have really moved forward. Now, some of the negatives of a lithium battery are due basically to its cost. It can cost about 2 to 2.5 times more than a lead acid battery. But the feature set of the built-in, it has what's called a battery management system. And this is a circuit board within the lithium battery that has a set of protection parameters that the battery cannot go outside of. So the battery cannot be overcharged. So if your system's bad, alternator breaks, start spiking voltages, our battery will knock that down and not allow it to penetrate to the interior lithium cell pack. If you left your lights on or had other accessories, were cranking the stereo, doesn't matter, because our battery will not allow itself to over discharge either. In fact, if you stuck a bar across the positive and negative terminals on our battery, it would prevent a short circuit or battery melting or anything. So it has a ton of built-in safety features, as well as offering what we call our premium feature. We call it the restart, which means that no matter what, our battery will not discharge to the point that you cannot start a car again. So lithium allows for that because it's a dry cell technology, whereas the lithium pack is basically a powder with a very small amount of electrolyte, and that allows the battery to be dry, not suffer from vibration, and can get you to a point where no matter any circumstance, you can actually drive away from it. You won't be stuck with a dead battery again.
What's the longevity on that type of battery versus flooded lead acid?
So without me wanting to market too much, as we've talked about, the fact is, from laboratory tests, completely independent, is that lithium cells provide up to 3,000 to 5,000 cycles. And what a cycle is a complete discharge of the battery and then a complete recharge of the battery. And to put that in perspective, lead acid is rated at 750 to 1,000 cycles for a premium lead acid battery. So lithium, in theory, has a lifespan of up to 3 times that of lead acid. But when you factor in the fact that we have this circuit board, the battery management protection system, that means that your battery will not suffer from what could accidentally happen with your lead acid battery. For example, leaving your lights on and over discharging a lead acid battery actually damages it. But with our protection system, your battery can't be damaged, so you can get that ultra long life out of a lithium battery.
And I guess that's why I was asking is, you talk about the premium cost for a battery like that, but I look at it as, I was foolish and bought that cheapy battery for my Cayenne as a second battery, but then 3 years later I had to buy another one. So if you added the cost of those two cheap batteries, I probably just should have gone back with my original one, and I would have been just as good. So for those of you that are considering a lithium, there's so many great positive benefits for it. And yes, it is expensive, but it's going to last longer. And as you said, Scott, it has all these special features, which is pretty cool. And also, saving weight. And for those of us chasing 0.4 of a second at an autocross, that's for you, Damon, because that's what he beat me by. I'm not sore about that, but I'll take you down this weekend. Anyways, so back to the show. There's a reason for that. So the last piece I want to talk about in terms of modern battery technology, let's talk about the Antigravity Battery Tracker, because that's a cool piece that we just gave away, and I'm not sure that people really know how cool it is.
The winner is going to be pretty stoked on it. So basically what the battery tracker is it's a very simple to install device. It's probably about the size of half a deck of cards, and it's simple to install because all you do is connect one lead to the positive terminal and one lead to the negative terminal of your battery. So it's literally a 2-minute install. But what it does is you download an app for your iPhone or Android device, and then you can link to this battery tracker. And what it will do is track all the voltage at your battery 24 hours a day. So you actually don't have to get in your car to see what its current sitting voltage is. And then it will give you a graph of all that voltage over the previous 31 days. So you can actually see the amount of parasitic drain occurring on your battery. So you look at 4 days in a row, you'll see the voltage, maybe it's sitting at 13 initially, and then you'll see it sag, but you'll be able to tell how fast it goes down to, say, a 12.2 range, which is very low in the discharge state of a battery. But you'll be able to see that and then understand how long you can actually let your car sit without putting it on a charger. Additionally, it has a feature that sort of, in an offhand way, can measure the status and the health of your battery, because on your initial start attempt, it will show the voltage drop in a graphical format. For example, you start your car, it's going to show that if it started at 12.6 volts and dropped down into the 7 or 8 volt range, that's a severe indication that your battery is not in very good shape, because the normal voltage drop would be down to 10 volts maybe. So you're seeing that it's dropping down to 8, and that means your battery isn't holding its power as well as it used to. And it also has a little alternator test on there that will allow you to make sure if your alternator is actually charging the vehicle efficiently. So it's a cool little product that you can look at your cell phone anytime, see the history of the voltage of your battery, and monitor some other health features of it.
Well, folks, there you have it. We are at the top of the hour. I want to thank Scott so much for joining us tonight. For those of you that are watching, please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And remember about the PCA 3 for 4 contest. It's free, $2,000 worth of tires to the winner if you participate. And that's it for tonight. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye, everyone.